We are booked on a cruise from Amsterdam to Basel on Scenic Jasper. But before we start, we already know it will not be Jasper because of the effect of the low water levels on the River Rhine. And when we arrive, it's Scenic Ruby that we board. Thanks to a very early EasyJet flight from Manchester, we're on board the ship by mid-morning, and our room is soon ready. We are berthed between the Ocean Cruise Terminal and Central Station. After such an early start, we decided just to rest for the remainder of the day. The next day, our included trip is to Edam and Volendam. We leave our coach near this bus station on the edge of Edam. We begin our walking tour along the banks of one of the canals. From the Middle Ages, Edam was an important trading town, and not surprisingly, cheese was an important part of that trade. These former warehouses have throw doors in the gables, where the cheese would be thrown in from below for storage. Most of the 15th century Church of Our Lady was demolished in the 1880s. But its tower and carillon remain, and they chime every 15 minutes. Standing on the actual dam that gives Edam its name. The town hall. These houses were originally built for the widows of seafarers who lost their lives at sea. We visited a cheese farm and factory. This farm is so automated the cows practically milk themselves. And so to Volendam, a resort town on the Markermeer. This used to be a branch of the North Sea, but was isolated by damming in the 1930s and is now a freshwater lake. Late afternoon, and Ruby sets off towards Basel along the Amsterdam-Rhine canal. The canal was opened in 1952 and has 4 sets of locks in its 45-mile length. It crosses or intersects with a couple of other rivers and waterways, before eventually joining the River Rhine via the River Waal, which then joins the Rhine near the German border. We continue to cruise through the night and the following morning, and it's early afternoon as we approach Cologne. We took the included trip to see Cologne Cathedral, Germany's most visited tourist attraction. Building commenced in 1248 and was discontinued temporarily in 1473. Building recommenced to the original plans in 1842 and was completed in 1880. There's also time to have a quick look at the Hohenzollern Bridge just behind the cathedral and a stretch of Roman road which has been excavated, moved and relaid. Overnight, Ruby sails to Koblenz and we awake to a misty scene on the River Moselle. We'll be leaving Ruby here and joining Scenic Crystal in Rudesheim after we've passed the Rhine Gorge. This is our luggage being collected to be moved to the Crystal. We have an included guided walking tour of Koblenz, and our first stop is the history column. Erected in the year 2000, this depicts Koblenz's 2000 years of history. Koblenz was badly damaged in the Second World War, and the old town contains some older buildings interspersed among the new ones. Jesuit Square in the centre of the old town is based around the former Jesuit College, now the town hall. The Church of Our Lady, rebuilt after the war like so much. Koblenz is fond of its street sculptures. The 18th century merchant's house had to be rebuilt after the war, and its clock includes the eye roller. The eyes move in time with the pendulum, and his tongue sticks out on the hour. After lunch, we walk around German Corner, presided over by the Emperor William I, to join our day cruise boat which is moored on the Rhine. The fortress of Ehrenbreitstein faces German Corner. We managed to get seats on the top deck of the day cruise boat, which is very crowded and very noisy. So we eventually head off on our Rhine Gorge adventure, passing loads of castles, looking back at Koblenz as we leave. Schloss Stolzenfels is in fact a hotel. Marksburg Castle. The vineyards here can be on very steep hillsides. Arriving in the smart resort town of Boppard. The castles of Sternberg and Liebenstein. Mouse Castle. Approaching the town of St. Gar, that's Rheinfels Castle. Across the river, above the town of St. Garhausen, is Cat's Castle, so we have cat and mouse. The statue of Lorelei relates to the legend of a siren who used to draw sailors to their doom in these waters. And this is the actual Lorelei Rock. We're approaching Kaub, where we leave the boat and are taken by coach to join Crystal in Rudesheim. In the morning we wake up in our new room, which is not a lot different from the old one, a bit newer and fresher. Our included trip today is to Siegfried's Mechanical Music Cabinet, a museum of mechanical musical instruments in a former merchant's 15th century home. Most of the instruments look quite spectacular, and some of them which are played are very loud.
grand piano exhibited. These instruments were the peak of the mechanical music development, and these instruments were built in the early 20th century.
After that virtuoso performance, we do our own happy wandering via the cable car to the Niederwald viewpoint. To one side we look over the vineyards to the River Rhine. To the other, the Niederwald monument. Completed in 1883, this commemorates the unification of Germany in 1871. Back to the cable car to head down over the vineyards, and grapes are still being picked. It's the 30th of September. Back on terra firma, and we're strolling through the town, heading back eventually to Scenic Crystal. Having reached the river, we turn left and head towards the jetties where the river cruise ships berth. And here is Scenic Crystal. A pleasant afternoon on the sun deck, cruising up the Rhine. This damaged handrail was apparently caused by a collision with a bridge a couple of weeks ago. Biebrich Palace in Wiesbaden, which is the capital of the state of Hesse. And on the other side of the river, Mainz, which is the capital of the state of Rhineland-Palatinate. We arrive in Mannheim overnight, where we get off to go on our tour to Heidelberg. Scenic Crystal, however, sails away to head upstream, where we will rejoin her later. Heidelberg is a university city on the River Neckar. In the Middle Ages, it was the seat of the prince-electors of the Palatinate, and the ruins of their castle still stand. The old bridge was built in the late 18th century, but its foundations date back to Roman times. It now has a scale showing how high floodwaters have risen in various years. The centre of the old town is the corn market with the town hall. The statue of Hercules is from the beginning of the 18th century. The Church of the Holy Spirit is mainly 15th century. From 1706 until 1936, it was partitioned into two so that Catholics and Protestants could both worship there. It's now entirely a Protestant church. In the Middle Ages, the narrow lanes running down to the river were each generally the preserve of a particular trade, say bakers or fishmongers. We rejoined Crystal at Germersheim and sailed a relatively short distance to Rastatt. Here we were taken to the Baroque Palace of Rastatt, where we enjoyed a wonderful evening of operatic arias and duets. In the morning we're dropped off at Strasbourg, while Crystal makes its way further upriver for us to rejoin later. On our way into Strasbourg, we pass some of the European institutions. This is the Council of Europe, the European Court of Human Rights, and the European Parliament building. We're dropped off at the edge of the old city centre to begin our walking tour. The old city is effectively an island surrounded by waterways. Johannes Gutenberg, the pioneer of printing, lived in Strasbourg for some time, and his statue is here in the Place Gutenberg. And just round the corner, our first sight of Strasbourg Cathedral. The large facade is covered in intricate Gothic tracery. Building started in 1015 and was largely complete by 1439. The famous astronomical clock was unfortunately under restoration. Having walked the 15 minutes back to our coaches, we found that our return to the ship would be delayed by several hours due to congestion in the lock system. We walked back into the city centre, where our amazing cruise director Kathy had managed to arrange lunch for 160 people. It's our last night on board Scenic Crystal, and tomorrow we'll disembark in Basel. So let's have a look around the two Scenic ships we were on. The layout of both ships is virtually identical. There are some minor differences in facilities and decor. And so to Basel for a 2-night stop. We were booked into the Hotel Merion, which is the one on the left at the other end of the bridge, but that was closed the previous day. After some minutes of confusion, we were directed to the Kraft Hotel, 2 doors to the right. This seemed to be a better hotel than the one we'd actually booked and paid for, so in the end everything worked out well. Our room was spacious and decorated in a sort of Scandinavian style. The hotel had an excellent restaurant, although pricey, but then this was Switzerland. Our room looked out over the old town on the opposite bank of the Rhine. Our hotel stay includes a free Basel card, which includes access to Basel's extensive public transport system. The town hall dates from the early 16th century. The Tinguely fountain was created by the French-Swiss sculptor Jean Tinguely in 1977. Behind it is the modern Performing Arts Centre. Behind that is the open church of St. Elizabeth, a 19th century neo-Gothic building. It's an uphill walk to the cathedral square. The building was completed in 1500, although there are older parts. It is no longer a cathedral, since it is part of the Swiss Reformed Church, which has no bishops. Behind is a viewing platform where we can see the side of the river where our hotel is. We start our walk downhill towards the bridge. This 1905 bridge replaced the 13th century middle bridge. Basel's tram routes extend into France and Germany, where there are suburbs of the city. The Spalentor is one of Basel's 3 remaining medieval city gates. Back in the market square by the town hall now. A stroll along the river near our hotel. Held by an overhead cable, these little ferries cross the Rhine, powered only by the river current. These river cruisers berthed closer to the city centre than we did. Some people come prepared. This wine bar belongs to our hotel, which is just across the road. It's about an hour by train from Switzerland's 3rd largest city to its largest city, Zurich. We arrive at Zurich's main railway station, and directly opposite is our hotel, the Schweizerhof. It stands on the corner of Bahnhofstrasse, Station Street, which is Zurich's main high-end shopping street. It's about a mile to the other end of Bahnhofstrasse, but you can use the excellent and frequent trams. The other end of Bahnhofstrasse is on Lake Zurich, from where you can get ferries. And this is what we did. The lake is about 25 miles long and is surrounded by a number of villages and towns. The ferry goes as far as Rapperswil. It's possible to disembark here and get the train back into Zurich, but we decided to stay on and do the full round trip on the ferry. Some of the towns and villages along the lake are amongst the most sought after suburbs of Zurich. Approaching Zurich city again. Back in the city centre, the river Limmat flows out of Lake Zurich northwestwards. We can walk back to our hotel along the west bank. The Fraumünster Church was founded as an abbey in the 9th century. On the opposite bank of the river, the Grossmünster Church. On Sunday morning, we walk across the river to the oldest part of Zurich. The old town hall built in the 17th century. The Grossmünster was started about 1100 and played a vital part in the Swiss-German Reformation. Mozart stayed in this house. Back at the railway station to get a train to Utilberg, a viewing point overlooking the lake. Once you get off the train, there's still quite an uphill hike to get to the viewpoints. There is a viewing platform, but we'd already climbed enough, so we gave it a miss, and it was very crowded anyway. Our final adventure was a much delayed Swiss Airlines flight from Zurich to Manchester.